Hello and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Sally Duplantier. I'm the host of Wellness Wednesday, and I'm also the founder of a company called Zing. And I have a mission, and that's to help older adults live their best life longer. Now, we've talked a lot about the role of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, social engagement to live our best life longer. But I'm so excited to welcome Kerry Devlin today, who's going to talk about the role that music can play in our health and well-being. Hi, Kerry.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with all of you and to share space and to talk about my favorite thing, music.
I know. I'm delighted to have you. So, a couple of thank yous are in order. First of all, these programs are free to anybody who wants to come, but they're not free per se. So, we rely on the support of our community to help fund this. Names in red have just joined this year, and Names in green just joined this past month. They've become community supporters. I also want to thank our many promoting partners who help share the word and tell their communities about Wellness Wednesdays. So, a little bit of background. I want to talk about my inspiration for today's program. When I was doing my research at University of Southern California on Alzheimer's, I was introduced to a documentary called Alive Inside. And this was an award-winning documentary in 2014, and it talked about the incredible power that music has to reach people with Alzheimer's disease. And there's no way that I can describe it. So what I'm going to do is show you the video. I noticed somebody raised their hand, and I can't actually call on you, but if you want to type something into the chat, I will take a look at that. But let me go ahead and show the video, and then I'll check the chat.
What do you think of music?
My heart belongs to music. I love it.
Have you ever had music just hit you in a place that immediately brought you to tears? Music has that power.
Music connects people with who they have been, who they are in their lives. Because what happens when you get old is all the things you're familiar with and your identity are all just being peeled away.
Our healthcare system imagines the human to be a very complicated machine. We have medicines that can adjust the dials. Blood pressure, oh, turn that down. Blood sugar, oh, turn that down. We haven't done anything to touch the heart and soul of a patient.
One resident that barely opened her eyes, she didn't respond. Knew her for 2 years. Once we put the iPod on her, she started shaking her feet. She started moving her head. It was amazing.
Music has more ability to activate more parts of the brain than any other stimulus.
Who am I? Huh? Who am I? I'm your daughter.
By exciting or awakening those pathways, we have a gateway to stimulate and reach somebody who otherwise is unreachable.
It can't get away from me if I'm in this place.
It takes me back to my school. That's beautiful.
Does it make you happy to sing for us?
Yeah. I'm crying.
Every human being needs stimulation from the outside, from little babies to old people.
American culture is wrong. There is actually life beyond adulthood. There's the opportunity to live and grow and become elders. The aging that we experience holds in it very important learnings and lessons.
There is no pill that does that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so there's a tears of joy.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to grow wings.
I was trying.
So that was, it still is powerful to me. Every time I share that, it just still has that impact. And after seeing that trailer and that movie, I wanted to learn more. So I reached out to Johns Hopkins Center for Music and Medicine, to the director, Alex Pontolat, and he introduced me to our amazing speaker today, Kerry Devlin. Kerry is a senior music therapist at Johns Hopkins Center for Music and Medicine. She also works in the Department of Neurology at the School of Medicine. She's a busy lady. She's adjunct faculty at Shenandoah University. And on top of all of this, she is a doctoral student at Aalborg University in Denmark, which means that she actually has to go to Denmark now and then to continue her studies. So I'm going to stop my share. I will go ahead and monitor the chat to answer that question that came up. And Kerry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. I'm going to get my slides shared here. So let's see. Might just take me a second. All right. How are we cooking?
It looks good.
Fabulous. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Yes, I do wear many hats in my current career, but the biggest, or perhaps the most important one that to me that I wear, is working as a music therapist. So I've been a music therapist for about 10 years, and I've been working at Johns Hopkins for the last 2, and hopefully many more to come. And I'm going to share with you today a little bit about what it is that we do at the Center for Music and Medicine. I'll tell you sort of who is involved, what kinds of projects we're currently undertaking, and what our big hopes and dreams are for the future. Spoiler alert, it's that everyone has access to music at all times as part of their healthcare. We, Dr. Panteliat, who was mentioned earlier, he always says his big dream as a neurologist is to just prescribe people concerts, to be able to go to a concert as part of your medical care for your well-being. And I think that's a perfect goal. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I work, and I'll talk a bit about music therapy, because where I work, the Center for Music and Medicine involves both music medicine and music therapy initiatives. So kind of clinical and non-clinical kinds of music experiences so that patients can encounter music in all different contexts in the ways that are most resonant to them. But I'll talk a bit about clinical music therapy as a practice and as a profession. And then I'm going to share some examples of music therapy in action, some different ways that music therapists like myself might work with folks across the lifespan. And I'll connect that back to some of our research projects. And then I hope to have a really nice open discussion with everyone where I can answer your questions and hear about your own experiences and connections with music. So that's the plan.
I love the plan, and I'll tell people that you can use the Q&A button if you have questions as we go. Just type them in, and we'll be saving the last 10 minutes for Q&A.
Perfect. So the Johns Hopkins Center for Music and Medicine is not yet a brick and mortar location, but we are essentially a collective of people across all of Johns Hopkins that encompasses the university, the School of Medicine, and then Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so we are a multidisciplinary team comprised of music therapists, researchers, physicians like neurologists, PTs, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, nurses. And so there's quite a lot of us, actually. We have a number of projects going, and we are led by a neurologist, Dr. Panteliat, who also is a really fantastic violinist in his spare time. But we as a collective really believe in the importance of integrating music into healthcare. And what we mean by that is making music and rhythm part of the healthcare that people receive, both while they're inpatient at the hospital, but also as part of their ongoing care, whether that's for treatment of a neurological diagnosis, or whether that's just for general well-being and enhancing quality of life. We really believe people should have access to music as a healthcare encounter. And we also really like to support the health of musicians too. A number of the people who are involved in our center help musicians when they have injuries to help them play in ways that are safe for their bodies and that also allow them to continue to access the arts for themselves. And so our biggest undertaking is kind of this combination of research projects and clinical practice. So there are some members of our team who are primarily there as researchers, some folks like me who are really positioned as clinicians or clinician researchers. But when we work together, our goal is for the programs that we create and the research that we undertake to be relevant and meaningful to the people that we aim to support. And so that often means that many of our clinical programs start from a desire from patients to engage in different kinds of experiences, and then down the road might turn into a research project. And sometimes on the flip side, we have research projects that might have involved, engagement in music for a period of time. And people after the study finished said, I want to keep doing that. So can we just keep that program going? So we have a lot of programs. Some examples are our Parkinsonics Choir, which is a group of folks who have movement disorders who come together every week to sing in a choir. And that was originally a research project, and everybody was so appalled that it was going to end when the study period was over. They just kept it going. So they still meet every week to this day. And I think that's a great example of how we really want our programs to serve the people that we're aiming to serve. And so we hope that intention is really received by all of the people who access our programs. And so these are just a couple of examples of some of the different places where we both provide clinical encounters, different kinds of music experiences, and where we also have research projects. So you'll notice a lot of them are both. We have clinical encounters with those patient communities, and then also have research projects stemming from that work, some of which I'm going to talk about today. But because I live and work in neurology, much of my encounters are with folks who have memory disorders like Alzheimer's or dementia, folks who have movement disorders like Parkinson's disease. I work with a lot of people who are in acute stroke recovery, who've experienced an aneurysm or head trauma, or a brain tumor. And so I meet with them often while they're hospitalized, receiving critical care. And my role is really to bring music into a space, into the hospital space, to humanize it and to help people feel what they're feeling and to make meaning of their experiences, using music as a tool to do that.
Kerry, before you go on, I have a question about a couple things on the last slide. What in the world is a brain rescue unit?
That's a great question. And it's actually not a name I've heard in other hospitals that I've had encounters in. So it's a very specialized portion of the inpatient neurology unit that is primarily for folks who are recovering from very acute, very recent stroke or brain injury. So it's kind of like a step down from the intensive care unit, where they're getting really specialized physical rehabilitation. There's a very specialized team of which I often collaborate with. I often work with speech therapists and physical therapists, and we co-treat because for many people who've had strokes, they may have lost the ability to speak, but not the ability to sing. And it's a really cool thing about our brains. There's so much plasticity that we're able to bypass some of those damaged pathways to still be able to produce music even when we can't access verbal speech, which is pretty amazing.
Thank you. And can you explain briefly ataxia? And then I promise I'll let you go on.
That's a great, yes. So ataxia is a movement disorder that many people experience post-stroke. It does not have to happen post-stroke, but it tends to involve balance issues, sometimes difficulty accessing language. It can be kind of like a global motor impairment, often following some kind of neurologic diagnosis or an event like a brain injury. But we run support group programs for those folks. And so it's people of all ages who come and they share songs. Each week they bring songs that they want to share with the group, and they make music together and talk about their lived experiences. So it's become kind of like a peer support group, which is really special. All right. So what is music therapy? Hopefully I've piqued your interest by now and you're saying, I wonder what that is. It sounds kind of cool. So music therapy is a health profession that's not unlike if we think about the role of physical therapists or occupational therapists on a multidisciplinary care team. Music therapists are part of that team, but the tool that we use to support people's health and well-being is music. And so we are an evidence-based practice. We are regulated, at least in the United States, we are regulated by the Certification Board of Music Therapists. So to become a music therapist, you have to complete a bachelor's degree minimum. You have to complete a 1,200-hour clinical internship, which is about 6 to 7 months full-time. And then you have to pass your board certification exam, and then also any licensing requirements in the state where you're working. So music therapists have undergone very specific and specialized training in a way that might be different from other arts and health practitioners. So there are amazing, incredible folks at Hopkins who are musicians, who bring music into spaces in the hospital for aesthetic purposes, to change the soundscape of the hospital, to impact people's well-being. But that is considered a different kind of encounter from a music therapy encounter because we are clinical providers. So if you were in the hospital and I came to your bedside and said, hey, would you like to engage in some music? I would actually document that encounter in your medical record. And then that would be part of your record permanently. Other providers would be able to see it. And we would be addressing very specific goals and objectives together that were meaningful and relevant to you and your healthcare. And so in neurology, that often looks like supporting people's motor functioning or motor maintenance after a stroke, or as they're experiencing progression of a neurologic diagnosis. For me, I really love sharing space with people as they are processing their experiences. So people making sense of a new diagnosis that feels really big, or talking about a terminal diagnosis that they've just received, and working with them to engage them in legacy work that can be given to their loved ones and to help leave the mark that they want to leave on the world. And so you can see it kind of can be a really broad range from very, very functional supports to much more social, emotional supports that are not unlike the kinds of things you might seek out a talk therapist for. So we kind of cover the spread, and often music therapists will specialize and might have their focus be primarily rehabilitation or memory care, whereas other folks might really work in a similar fashion to a talk therapist and might even consider themselves to be music psychotherapists. So kind of just like any therapeutic progression, folks tend to specialize and find their niche. But if you were engaging in a music therapy session, that could happen in a lot of different ways. So some people enjoy or prefer individual encounters where perhaps they and a loved one or attend, by themselves or as a dyad. We do quite a lot of group music therapy sessions. So we have lots of free virtual programs for the patients in our movement disorders clinic, so they can zoom in from wherever they are and engage in music. We also do groups in the community, physical in-person groups. We also have many music therapists will work in a more community-oriented paradigm where their work is really to engage with communities for the purpose of justice-oriented work. So I've had the honor of working with kids in Baltimore City who wanted to engage in a songwriting process to talk about their lived experiences and to share wisdom and knowledge with their peers who were younger than them. And so we created the project and a music video, and they shared that in a showcase with members of their own community. And so sometimes music therapy can look like making music or composing music, and sometimes it might look like sharing the music that you like to hear. Yes, and of course, as I mentioned, it can also be virtual, which is kind of a cool thing to be able to have music therapy in your house, in your PJs.
And Kerry, a question just came in, which I'll address. Go back one slide.
Perfect.
To the Zoom. So give us an example. If this were a music therapy session and we were doing it on Zoom, would we sing? Like, what would we do?
Yeah, so it totally depends on the group, what the purpose of the group is. But I facilitate a lot of support groups that we don't really have a plan. We all sign on, and I might say, what do you want to do today? Do you feel like moving? Do you feel like singing? Do you feel like you need some mindfulness time to really sit and reflect? And so a virtual session can look like me screen sharing some lyrics and inviting everybody to mute or unmute to your comfort level, to sing, to work on phonation and, speech quality. And then we might transition into a movement experience where I might be playing music live in a very specific way to provide a clear pulse that people can move along with. And sometimes I might just invite people to request songs, and we might sing or play them together and then actually talk about the song lyrics and explore, the ways that they connect to our own lived experiences. So a great example of that is in a recent support group, I played the song Landslide by Fleetwood Mac because we were having a discussion about changes related to illness. And it opened up a really big space for everyone to kind of talk about some of the changes that they had experienced. Everybody had their own individual journey, but found connection in the shared experience of everybody was going through change. And that change was sometimes really hard. And to be able to share it in a supportive space where other people understand what you're going through, I think provided an opportunity for people to really open up and to lean on each other. And so sometimes it's really about opening up a process for the group to engage in that a lot of times I don't even have to say very much. I might play the song and then sit back and the group kind of takes it from there. So I think of my role more as a facilitator, where I'm really listening to what people are saying, and I might make some suggestions based on what I'm hearing, or kind of reflect back the sentiments that folks are sharing. But it's really about what the group wants and needs.
And so it might be a group like that's going through illness. They're processing, I'm just going to say a terminal illness.
Yes.
It could also be a group that has movement disorders. In other words, the group, what you do via Zoom or live really depends on what the group is designed to facilitate.
Exactly. And in the hospital, it might look very different. I've been at bedside when patients I've worked with are actively dying, and I might be invited into the room if we have a very strong relationship, and I might play music as they make their transition from one world to the next. I sometimes provide procedural support, both in pediatrics. There are some really scary things that happen for kids when they're in the hospital that you have to be awake for, and it can be really distressing. And music is a really strong and engaging stimulus that can help shift someone's attention away from a feeling of pain or distress to help create space in the room for providers to be able to do what they need to do, and for that child to also have a much more positive healthcare encounter. And I also do that with adults too, because adults have to get stuck with stuff and it's not very fun. And so I support with things like lumbar punctures in the adult neurology unit as well. So totally depends on the needs of the person or the people in the space.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I mentioned this a little bit before, but music therapists have certain credentials. So if you're seeking out to work with a music therapist, I highly recommend making sure they have the credential, if you're in the United States, MTBC, because that means they've gone through an accredited program, they've completed all their clinical hours, and that they have passed their national certification exam. If you live in a state that has licensure, you probably also would want to check for that licensing information. And at the end, I'll give you some websites, if you're in the United States, where you could look up. Every country kind of has their own certification process. So I'm happy to help if you are not in the US, but interested in connecting with a music therapist. But music therapists also often go on to have master's degrees or even pursue doctoral degrees. And so why music, and why music therapy as a treatment modality? I mean, I'm certainly a little bit biased as a musician and as somebody who works as a music therapist, but I've seen the way that music can move people in different ways, in different times in their lives, and even some of the darkest and most vulnerable moments of people's lives, music provides an opportunity for expression without having to use words, which can be so difficult to access when you're going through the unthinkable or the unspeakable. And so music can sometimes resonate with us in ways that we might not have expected. So oftentimes I'll, invite someone to choose a song or to share a song, and then they might have a very strong emotional reaction and say, I don't know why this is happening. But as we continue to play together and as we process it, it often becomes really apparent that it was the music just opened up a space for someone to feel and express something that was really deep down inside. Music is also so flexible. Music therapists are trained not only to play a lot of different instruments and to play in many different genres, but we improvise as well. And so oftentimes, to use that previous example of someone having a very emotional reaction, I might then continue playing the song or improvise using the song structure to hold space for someone to have an emotional release and to feel like the music is holding them and containing them and wrapping them in a little bit of love. And I can keep that going as long as I need to for that person to move through that emotional process. And then I might shift the music to bring them back to a grounded place. And so music allows us as practitioners, but also folks who are participating in a music experience to be creative and to try different things and to shift the music in response to what someone needs in the moment. And it's just motivating. I mean, I don't know who exercises without music. I can't do it. It's not possible for me to move my body without listening to music. And so pairing music in a rehabilitation setting, pairing music with physical exercise, especially when that exercise is really painful, can really help motivate someone to engage in their care in new ways. So, as I mentioned, music can help us move. We as music therapists use a principle called entrainment. That maybe is your word of the day from today. Musical or rhythmic entrainment is essentially the process through which our brains sync up with music in the environment. It's not something that we do intentionally or consciously. It happens whether or not we're trying to. So even if you're somebody who says, I cannot keep a beat, I have no sense of rhythm, you actually do. And your brain will override maybe your body isn't quite playing the right rhythm, but if you give it long enough, I promise your brain will force your body to synchronize. So if you've ever been in a public place, maybe in a waiting room and noticed I'm tapping my foot, and maybe you might notice after that, oh, there's music playing. That's because our brains are doing stuff when we're not involved in the process. But music is processed in so many different parts of our brain that when we hear a musical or a rhythmic stimulus, our brains over time sync up to it, and our bodies want to output a motor response. And so for folks who are experiencing a neurologic diagnosis that's impacting their ability to move in ways that they used to be able to, playing instruments or singing or walking to a steady beat can use this principle of entrainment to actually help improve motor functioning. And so I've seen folks who have a really impacted gait, ambulation after stroke, or even as part of experiencing a movement disorder. And the moment a steady beat, just a basic metronome, is put into the environment, that person will gradually start to sync up their footfalls with that steady pulse. And so the brain that engages in music is changed by it. It responds to music, whether or not we're trying to. So music helps us move, but it also helps us to remember. So this research that is cited here is a model for music and autobiographical or like personal memory recall. It's called the SEED model. And it's because that acronym comes from music summoning memories. So when we hear music, we automatically recall memories associated with hearing that music specifically, but also memories from the times in our life around the time where that music was very salient to us. So for example, when I hear the song in my life by the Beatles. I think about the first time I heard that song. I think about when I learned that song on the guitar and the guitar riff, but I also think about dancing with my dad to that song at my wedding. So those memories can't really be separated. That music elicits all of the memories associated with that song. And in conjunction with that, music evokes emotions. So when I hear that song, I often get very teary-eyed because it makes me think of that moment that I shared with my dad at my wedding. And that was really special to me. And so I'm having all of these memories come back. I'm having an emotional response. And I might also have a physiologic response when I hear these songs. My heart rate might change, or my breathing might entrain with the pulse of the song. Much of my work in the hospital is actually working with people's vital signs and using music to help increase their oxygen saturation or decrease their heart rate or the respiration rate. And so our bodies respond to music, and music is part of our identities. The music, especially from our youth, from our kind of teens through our 20s, that is so salient to our growing up process, to our transition into adulthood and being in the world and building new relationships and meeting spouses and having children and all of those things. And so we can't separate all of these different parts of music. When we hear a song, all these things happen, especially if it's a personally meaningful song. So
Kerry,
music, yes.
I'll add to that, as you were going through it, it's like you can't not remember those things.
Yes.
Like you can't turn that off. It's so in there.
And that's often why music is so meaningful to use with folks who are experiencing memory-related challenges, because even if you have a short-term memory loss, music is stored in our long-term. These older memories, they're part of who we are, and that stuff doesn't go away. It's some of the last memories to go because of the way that they're encoded in our brains. And so it's a really powerful thing to work with someone who has difficulty remembering so many things, and maybe even people and more recent memories, but then they hear a song from their wedding and they remember every single word.
Yep. I'm going to share a really brief story about Alzheimer's. So I have a dear friend who is probably on this call. She definitely attends Wellness Wednesdays, and she volunteers at a residential facility for Alzheimer's patients. And they were working in the garden, and there is a woman with Alzheimer's who's pretty advanced. And I don't know, there was a daisy. There was like a daisy flower. And this woman started singing. I better not sing.
Daisy, Daisy. That one?
And the woman with Alzheimer's was able to sing along. And it's just so powerful, because music can touch a part of the brain that is not ravaged by Alzheimer's. And that was what the Alive Inside, documentary is about. So I just wanted to share that, because it was just, you can't not remember.
No, you can't not remember, you can't not move, and you can't not feel something when you're hearing music, especially music that is important to you. And we know from research that, music affects us physiologically, but it also affects our emotional regulation and our nervous system activity. So when we listen to music that we like, we get hit with a dopamine rush. Dopamine is one of those neurotransmitters that's released in our brain that's like a reward chemical. So if you eat a really good cookie, you get hit with some dopamine. If you listen to a song you really like, dopamine. So it's the same response. Many parents, I often work with parents and babies who are hospitalized to facilitate their bonding, to help stimulate the release of neurotransmitters like oxytocin, the bonding and love neurotransmitter and hormone in our body that's so important for parents and babies, especially really early on. So when we hear music we like, it can improve our mood, it can reduce anxiety, and it can actually help calm some of our nervous system activity, especially if we're in a state of fight or flight. It can help ground us a little bit as our bodies and brains entrain with the music and the environment. And so I'm going to give you 3 very quick examples of music therapy in action that are 3 different contexts that I have the honor of working in at Johns Hopkins. So you'll see in this picture of an adorable little baby in the cardiac ICU. And in this photo, I'm actually co-treating with an occupational therapist. So these babes are in the hospital for quite a long time. They often have many, many lines, many invasive surgeries. They might even have open chests after a surgery, and parents may not be able to pick up their child for weeks or months as they're in surgical recovery. And so you can imagine for babies and families, that's really distressing. Your sleep cycles are disturbed. You're in a lot of pain and needing a lot of pain medication. Their neurodevelopment, their typical developmental processes are impacted when they're put into stasis or medical paralysis, or they're sedated as part of their treatment. And so my role was often I would get sent into all the crying babies. So the nurses would say, this one, this one, this one. We've got some really fussy babies today who are having a really tough time. And especially the babies who can't be held, because sometimes they can't even be touched, or they can only be touched in very specific locations on their body. But music is a very soothing stimulus. So I would often sing to them, and I would watch the monitors and make sure that they were not overstimulated by the sound. And often, as I would sometimes just sing with my voice, just lullabies continuously. I might sing their name or sing about their families, or even coach a parent to do the singing themselves. So we're singing together at bedside. And we almost always notice the same trends of oxygen going way up, heart rate coming way down. So showing us that even when sedated, they're still listening and hearing the music and receiving it in a meaningful way. And we are currently working on some research projects where we looked at the charts of a bunch of babies who received this service and found this was a safe intervention. There were really positive physiologic trends, and that the people who benefited the most were the very sickest babies, the babies who couldn't really access any other supports, but music was really meaningful for them. And so a big part of my work is also working with adults who have neurologic diagnoses. And I'm really believe strongly in peer support and creating spaces where people can come together and meet other people who are going through a similar life experience. I know for me, as somebody who lives with chronic illnesses and someone who identifies as being disabled, that was essential for me to connect. When I received all these diagnoses, I didn't know anybody else who had the same diagnoses as me. And so I believe really strongly in kind of continuing that cycle and creating spaces for the patients that I work with so that they can share music and share their life experiences. And sometimes that looks like talking, sometimes that looks like singing or dancing or playing instruments, or just listening to music and engaging in music and relaxation experiences. And we're currently interviewing a bunch of folks who've come to our support groups. We're collaborating with the School of Public Health, and they're really curious. They want to find out, how does music therapy, specifically virtual music therapy, impact people's feelings of social support? Like, what is the reason why they come to these groups, and what kinds of support are they leaving with? Why do they keep coming back? Because we have a lot of folks who keep coming back. And I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what folks say about their experiences to really amplify the voices of the people who participate in music therapy. And then, as we've been talking about throughout, we also really have the honor of working with many folks who have memory-related diagnoses. We have quite a large study going on right now. It's got a long title. It's Music for Alzheimer's Disease and Autobiographical Memory, but we call it Music for ADAM. That's our acronym. But essentially, these are folks who have an Alzheimer's or a dementia, a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis, and they are participating in virtual music therapy with their care partner. So they get 16 sessions, and before those 16 sessions, they're getting an fMRI scan. And then after those 16 sessions, they're getting another MRI scan. And we're really curious to see what the results of these scans in particular will be, because folks are going to be listening to music in the scanner, songs that they've told us are important to them. And then we're really curious to see, has music therapy enhanced their ability to access autobiographical memory? What kinds of functional brain changes happened pre and post that series of music therapy sessions? And we're also, inviting folks to share, to participate in different kinds of questionnaires to find out about anxiety and depression and quality of life. And so we're trying to recruit quite a lot of people. So we're going to be doing this for a long time, but we're really excited. We have our first batch of preliminary data, and we're excited to see where it takes us.
And a question came in with, are the fMRI scans at Johns Hopkins? Is it
yes,
doing
they are. And so while the sessions can be delivered anywhere because they're virtual, there is a component where folks have to come before and after to be scanned physically on site, which is honestly the reason why our study is taking so long, because the MRI scanner is a hot commodity.
Yeah. And I'm looking at just the research, so cognitive, anxiety, depression, behavior, and quality of life assessments. So you're using questionnaires just to assess quality of life.
Exactly. Yeah. It's quite a lot of tests, actually. So the baseline testing is very comprehensive. For some folks, we have to do it over the course of multiple days because it's quite a lot of information. But it really helps us understand the different ways that music therapy might impact someone's life. I know we're coming to the end, so I want to leave you with some things that you can try at home, because music is pretty much free. Singing is free. You can sing whenever you want. Sing in the shower. I prescribe singing to everyone that I work with, because singing just one song, even for 30 seconds, I promise you'll get a dopamine rush. You're going to feel really good. You're going to feel grounded and connected to your body. And it doesn't matter if you don't think that you're a good singer, because singing is for everyone and music is for everyone. And I believe you're a good singer. And so I really encourage folks to engage in singing, especially as you're experiencing the aging process. Singing can help really maintain your respiratory strength, your vocal volume. It keeps your articulators fresh and ready to go. I encourage folks to seek out community singing experiences, sing at church, sing in community choirs or musical theater productions, go to musical events if and when you can. It's not too late to learn an instrument. Pick up the guitar if you've never tried it, or pick up the piano. And even just if all of those things feel like too much, just listening to music and using intentional music listening to modulate your mood is a really powerful thing. So I often tell people, it can be helpful to make some playlists or to use AI like Spotify or Pandora's playlist generators to create playlists like a feeling sad playlist or a get motivated playlist or a this is my before bed calm grounding playlist, because it can be so helpful to have those things available to you, especially if you feel like you're in a time of emotional crisis and it's too difficult to pick music. It's amazing to already have those things created for you, so that if you're somebody who struggles with insomnia, to have, okay, I have my before bed playlist. I'm going to try just for the length of one song, just closing my eyes and really mindfully listening to this music. And then I'm going to check in and see how I feel. Do I need to do it again? Or do I feel like, no, that grounded me and I'm ready to kind of transition into sleep? And so really, this is just an open invitation to engage in music in whatever way feels good to you. And I hope that will be meaningful and helpful to all of you. And so this is, oh, yes.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'd love for people to email me if you have questions. I know we have some time for a Q&A, and I see some. I'm going to stop my screen share in just a moment, and I can drop my email into the chat if that's helpful for folks. But
it is.
But thank you. And I'd love to open the floor for questions and comments.
Well, I just have to say, Kerry, you and I have talked before. We've had some conversations. This was an extraordinarily emotional webinar for me. And I'm going to invite people in the chat. If just type into the chat, I promise we're going to go through your questions. But if anyone had a lot of emotional reaction in this, I would just be curious to see that, because I sure did. And I think it started with showing that trailer, but then I couldn't stop thinking of my mom. And my mom loved to hum, and she loved to listen to Mitch Miller music. And I can still sing those songs. And I'm just saying it was just very emotional for me. So
I often feel the same way when I think about folks that I have collaborated with, people who have passed. Whenever I hear songs that we used to play together, I instantly have an emotional reaction because that song is just so interconnected with my memory of being with that person. So,
yeah. And the chat's lighting up. People are absolutely saying the same thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people could tell. I was kind of like, a little teary-eyed during this. Okay, let's go to some questions. This is from Rich. My wife used to play the guitar and loved to sing, but recently she has had problems appreciating music. It does not sound good to her as it used to, even though she uses hearing aids. Do you have any suggestions for helping her get back to enjoying music?
Yeah, that's really tough, especially when, sometimes when we're using sound amplification, it can change the way that music sounds aesthetically. And so I actually do work with some folks. It's a little bit of a different context, but I work with some folks who were professional musicians who now have movement disorders that have really impacted their ability to play in the same way that they used to be able to, which was a really grief process, to experience this loss and the change in sound or the change in ability to play. But I actually would encourage folks to connect with other musicians and to play together. So I know what some of these folks have told me is that in our sessions, when we hang out on Zoom, we just play music together. And it's a relaxed environment. It's a non-judgmental environment. But there is something about playing music with other people where you're getting feedback and it's a very shared, supportive space. I think there's just no substitute for it. And so I really encourage, see if there are some like musician meetups or, in your community where you live, places where I know near me, sometimes there's like meetups at pubs and bars and things where people just bring their instruments and go and jam. But I think engaging in music with other people can be a way to slide back into it where you can be an observer first and slowly transition, but build your confidence in an environment with other people who are also moving through the same process.
Kerry, that's a great suggestion. And one of our participants, Anne, mentioned Sonic Cloud. So I think from what I recall about Sonic Cloud, it is a way to, I believe, amplify the sound of music on like a computer or on an iPhone. I don't know that much about it, but I'll encourage people to go to soniccloud.com to learn more about it. So a couple more questions came in. How does music help with the grieving process?
I think that music can be a really powerful source of resonance. And so for many of the people that I work with, they're at all different stages of their grief process. Maybe they're really early on and they're not really ready to talk about either the loss of a loved one or to talk about their own impending dying process. So maybe we might start out just learning how to use music to manage anxiety, practicing breathing strategies paired with music, humming or singing as a grounding tool, just listening to music and building playlists and supports. And then as the therapeutic relationship grows and as folks reach a place where they're ready to start having conversations. I've planned funerals with people. We've made music playlists and worked to arrange who's going to play the music. And I've worked with folks who've written songs as a legacy project. At the hospital, we have a stethoscope that records people's heartbeat. And so I often work with a patient's families to record that person's heartbeat, and they choose a song. We call it a song of kin. And so they pick a song, and then I play that song live, and I use their heartbeat as the rhythmic pulse of the song. So it's something that families can hold on to, that patients, when they're able, can be involved in the creation process. And it's a little piece of legacy for that person to live on. And so I think music can provide opportunities to create projects, to just hold space for what you're feeling, and to support you wherever you are in your grieving process, whether that's very early on or it's music is actually the thing that is holding you as you're transitioning from one life to the next. And so it can be used in many, many different ways. So it's kind of a long.
No, it's an important answer. While we are officially at time, we have like 3 more questions.
Okay.
And I know some of you need to pop off, and that's fine. And I know, Kerry, you have another meeting coming up, but you have time for 3 more.
Sure, of course.
We will do them quickly, but they're all really good ones. Jenny asked, she said, I'd be interested in learning more about this approach to help someone manage pain from a stroke.
Yes.
Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So the way that our brains process music is very complex in a way that can actually really help with pain management, because it can override the part of our brains that are also perceiving painful stimuli. So I can't promise you'll feel nothing when you hear music, but many people I work with, when they're actively engaged in redirecting their focus to, say, they're looking at and listening to me play the guitar, and that's the only thing they're focusing on. They're focusing on their breath and they're focusing on the music. And they might report over time, I've thought a lot less about the pain, or I was really in the music and I realized I was not thinking about my back pain or my pain from the procedure earlier today. And so it can be a temporary tool to kind of shift your focus. But because of all of those feel-good chemicals that we have also released when we hear music, it can also really help modulate, upshift or downshift our nervous system, which is also responsible for the ways that our body perceives and responds to pain. So when we feel a painful stimulus, we often go into fight or flight. We have a very fast heart rate. We might be very sweaty. We might feel like I need to run away right now. I can't process this, but music downshifts our nervous system and calms our parasympathetic nervous system activity, so that it also helps our bodies regulate and attenuate to different kinds of stimuli. So I really encourage folks who are curious about exploring that to try listening to different kinds of music and using really nice headphones if you can, or really nice speakers. So like the sound quality is really good, where you can really be immersed in the experience, even if it's just for a 2 or 3 minute song. But just see what happens for you when you really intentionally focus on that stimulus, and then kind of do a check-in for yourself before and after. And it might take a little experimenting. But if it's something that's a chronic pain issue, you might also want to seek out working with a music therapist who can support you in that process.
And I will make sure to include the links that Kerry provided so that you can find a music therapist. People are also asking for your email, so I'm going to include that.
Oh, that's right. I did say I was going to put that in the chat.
Here are the 2 quick ones. Okay. Joan asked, what is it in the brain that allows some people to carry a tune and others not?
I actually don't know. I would actually have to consult my textbooks for pitch. I mean, I'm sure, if I'm guessing, I would assume it probably has something to do with your auditory processing system, and that, the ability to hear a pitch, and then probably something with your auditory motor system to then output the pitch. But I would actually have to give that a little dig to find. Now I kind of want to. So I might have to report back.
And Joan said, she said that wasn't her. It's not me either. So at any rate. All right. Our last question. Is there a difference in the impact if you're experiencing music live versus having something recorded?
I mean, I think it's kind of a personal preference thing. I know with many folks, sometimes if I don't know a song, or if I can't recreate it, it's a piece of classical music, I cannot recreate that live on my guitar, in a way that would be authentic to that recording. And so I know a lot of folks, it really is contingent on personal preference, though I will say many people have shared with me listening to music live in this intimate way elicited an emotional response that I didn't expect to happen. And I think a big part of that is because that music is delivered in the context of a therapeutic relationship. So there's also some trust and therapeutic rapport that's being built that I think opens up the space for that impact to shift a little bit. But I mean, I've gotten the feels and tears from recorded music before too. So in my opinion, they're both beautiful and perfect. And it's really about your personal preference.
Well, Kerry, thank you so much for staying on a little longer, for being here today. I love all my Wellness Wednesdays and all of my Wellness Wednesday speakers, but I will have to say this one is really, really special to me. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all the participants. I'll be sending out the recording and some links later this afternoon. Have a great day, everyone.